Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Senate Education 127, Thursday, January 12th. A little bit of an early start. We're going to hear today from Jeff Bannon, the Director of Vermont National Education Association for the state of Vermont. We're then going to have an hour with our state colleges, the Chancellor, as well as the President. And then we will go into Vermont Student Assistance Corporation, and I imagine we'll probably be done about 4:15, something like that. So with that, Shannon, welcome. This is your first time back into Senate Education.
It is.
And we have on the agenda introductions, updates, and priorities. And so if you would just, to set the table a little bit, tell us a little bit about yourself,
Sure.
Also the NEA. We want to get a good handle on what's happening in our schools. From your perspective, we've heard from the superintendents probably earlier this week, and going to make our way through the groups and also hear about your priorities. So with that, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair Campion. My name is Jeff Bannon, the Executive Director of Vermont NEA. And I'm going to start and give you a little bit from my written testimony, which I've submitted to Hayden. And I think you all have a copy. With me today is our Vermont NEA's General Counsel, Rebecca McBroom, who may appear here as well as our Government Relations Director, Colin Robinson. So I'll mention them later, but you may see them in this building occasionally as well. And certainly any of us are a resource for you going forward. So with that. So thank you for inviting me to talk to you today about Vermont NEA's priorities and how we can work together to ensure that all Vermont students can succeed and become happy, productive adults. And that's our goal. I'm Jeff Bannon, as I said, and I want to take a moment to note that how important our local public schools are, especially in the third year of a global pandemic. It's been a tough go. Before the pandemic, Vermont schools were the centers of our communities, where generations of Vermonters learned and explored, played, thrived, and grew. Not to brag, and why not? I will brag a little bit. We have some of the best schools consistently in the country. We outperform our peers across the country and do a really good job with students. That didn't happen by accident. Vermonters, you and your predecessors invested in local public schools because they and you know that how crucial a top quality public education is to our future. They and you also know that most cities and towns in the state, local public schools are huge economic development drivers. Excellent local public schools are, simply put, critical to our state's growth and success. That remains true even after the challenges that we faced and met and exceeded with the onset of the pandemic. What the pandemic really showed us was that our schools are safe havens for kids. We provided meals to all students. We had a place where students and families could rely on in these times of turmoil. And behind all that are the state's dedicated public school employees, teachers, paraeducators, school nurses, cafeteria workers, custodians, bus drivers, librarians, school counselors, administrators, and local school boards. They work hard every day to ensure that the ravages of the pandemic don't prevent our state's children from getting the education they need and deserve. I'm proud of our schools, and you should be too, but that doesn't mean we aren't without some challenges. Vermont's public schools remain a strong economic driver, but schools are achieving and recovering from the pandemic. And there are some realities that we must all recognize. The mental health system of Vermont is broken. The mental health system of Vermont is broken. And because of that, schools are where children end up, where they show up. And schools are stepping up in new and creative ways to address the social and emotional needs of students. Excuse me. Previously, these were AHS costs, but they've been shifted to schools and the education fund. These new solutions require human resources, people, staff, to provide services inside the schools. Schools need to be celebrated for stepping into the mental health breach but their work and corresponding expenses should be removed from EDGE spending. It wasn't there before and should be removed now. The social and emotional needs work is absolutely critical to the success of our students and schools, and this work must and will continue. This year, we will work on providing schools with resources and people they need to respond to the social and emotional needs of students. And there is a shortage. Obviously, there's a shortage of educators in the state. We know that. And all of us must devise ways to ensure that Vermont continues to attract and retain excellent public education workforce. To that end, we have been working with the curriculum directors in the Northeast Kingdom to grow their own teachers. That program called Grow VT Ed has 81 paraeducators who are working with Vermont NEA's professional director of professional programs, Juliet Longchamp, to become licensed teachers. So there are 81 people in that program. Thank you, Senator Campion, for pushing us last year in that direction. And this committee, your predecessors, for doing that as well. It's ongoing. It needs ongoing support, but it's thriving and excelling right now. So that's great. In an area of the state where really there is a huge shortage and demand. There are some other workforce shortage bills being discussed. There will be one coming out of the House as well. So we're looking for various reasons. It's one starting over there in the House to address some workforce shortage issues with educators. You may see that, and maybe it will be a companion bill in the Senate. We'll see how that goes. We think looking at whether we have enough counselors and mental health professionals in each of our schools is a worthy exercise. For example, because we know the social and emotional needs are so great right now, we believe there should be more counselors, school counselors, more school social workers, and other mental health professionals in schools. It is a high demand right now. It needs to happen. Indeed, we all must recognize the toll the social and emotional well-being the pandemic has taken on students, and we look forward to working with you to give our dedicated public school workforce the tools they require to address the needs of all students. To that end is a brief summary of our legislative agenda. These items were initially created by Vermont NEA members, and were approved by the Vermont NEA Board of Directors, and they guide our advocacy in the State House and beyond. Before I go, I want to give you all a little bit of an introduction as to who we are. In addition to Becca and Colin, you'll see Don Tinney. Don is a 31-year English teacher who is serving currently as the president of Vermont NEA. His work with Vermont students focused on literacy, and as such, he, alongside Senator Kulik, served on the Advisory Council on Literacy. And I did not attach a copy of that report, but I will make that available. I apologize. The report is impressive, good work, and ongoing work.
But yeah, okay.
All right, so I apologize, Hayden, and to all of you for not attaching. I said I would, I didn't. So that's who we are. Don Tinney, Becca McBroom, and Colin Robinson, and myself largely will be here on and off, and certainly a resource to you if you need something, questions. Who we are, our policy, our purpose and priorities is outlined there. Vermont NEA wants all children to have an excellent education. Our purpose is to make sure our members have satisfying work environments where they are acknowledged for the work they perform, and where the work they perform helps students do their best. And I always simply say this, students' learning conditions are educators' working conditions. They are inexorably intertwined, and likewise our advocacy efforts support both educators and students, therefore. Just quick tidbits on who we are. Vermont NEA is an affiliation of local associations of educators, teachers, and support staff in almost all public schools in Vermont, and there are more than 320 schools. Membership, we include retired teachers, student teachers, and it's about 13,000 Vermont educators who belong to the local association, Vermont NEA, and the 3 million National Education Association. 3 million members, I'm sorry. We have a 20-member board of directors elected by the membership, 4 statewide officers, 16 regional directors. I'm the executive director, and I serve ex officio on the board. We have about 20 staff members, almost entirely consisting of former teachers who train our members to bargain and administer their own collective bargaining agreements. So in other words, you'll hear talk of Vermont NEA, lawyers out in the field. Currently, we have Becca McBroom. I'm a lawyer as well, previously serving as general counsel, but that's it on staff. Most of our staff are former educators who then work with educators out in the field. They're our members, and teach them and train them and work with them to bargain and administer their contracts. So our model is from the ground up. That's who we are, and we hire almost exclusively teachers to do that. They're good teachers, as a matter of fact. We have some subject matter affiliates, some 20 or so. For example, the teachers of math, English, special education. We support them in many ways. They use our office for meetings at times. We support them in other ways. So that's who we are at Vermont NEA, and I'll conclude. Those are my formal remarks, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Yeah, it might be helpful to give, I do have one quick question.
Sure.
Really quick, but then I think it would be helpful just to give us a quick overview of your priorities. Kind of, 30,000.
Yep.
Foot kind of thing, but did you have an opportunity to look at watch yesterday's testimony?
I did not.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this 10-year trend of, NAEP results right here. I'm sure you've seen it. There's no good news on this end. I mean, with regard to language arts and math, and I want to speak for the committee, so I'll just speak to myself. We sort of started some of this work 2 years ago with the literacy bill.
Right.
Help us fix this. Tell us what is happening in the state of Vermont that these scores continue. And listen, I'm not. We're going to dig more into this next week. We have to come in to really explain to us, what's happening. Give us some sampling of what students may know, what they don't know on these tests. But there's no way you can look at 2013 to 2022, even with the pandemic, and say this is good news, it's bad news, and it's sad news, and we want to do something about it. And we know you're dedicated to this work also. So help us understand a little bit about what's happening from your perspective, and how can we turn this corner and make some headway.
Sure. I guess as I testified to, there's educator shortage.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. We're
This is 2013.
well, I think it, yes, and I'll say it
Okay.
even dates further back than that.
Okay.
And here's why.
Yeah.
I think under No Child Left Behind, we routinized and systematized education. Well, education is a relationship between the
Yeah.
teacher and the student, and it is not just a single test score.
Yeah.
I think students who are in school or just recently out of school have seen that and have reacted to that. Why would I go into education when I see how poorly teachers are treated, frankly? And I think that we're reaping what we sowed. This is not good news, and no
Right.
bone, not trying to hide from it. But why are we not attracting the best and brightest? We do attract some great teachers to it. We need to attract more, obviously. The number of students in educator programs in colleges is way down. We don't pay them a whole lot, frankly. The incentives are all misguided, I would say. So we've disrespected educators. We've
Tell me a
allowed.
little bit more about that, just so our community knows how.
Sure. I mean,
how,
we
just so
we've
want to make improvements on this front, so it's good to just sort of.
Sure, I understand. I think the notion is, we have said to teachers and paraeducators and others that just teach to the test, if you will. Because this concept of just teaching to the test, as long as the test scores go up, all is well. And that ignores the whole child. The social emotional needs that are so rampant right now. These are kids, and we saw this back in Rutland, maybe not a decade ago, but a long time ago, where the opioid crisis was showing up and it was ravaging the school community there. And the behaviors were outlandish, I would say. And these are young kids, kindergartners, first graders, and they're crying out for support. I mean, they're coming to school in need of a lot of services. We heard it in the state police talked about it as well, about the really young kids being taken away from parents who were addicted to opioids many years ago. Well, that bubble's just coming through.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the equation, the NAEP scores and other behaviors we're seeing. So I think schools are just a snapshot of what's going on in the community at large. All kids show up in the schools. That's great. Bennington has had community schools programs for some time. We need to expand on that, which is a bill from a couple of years ago, establishing some pilot community schools. We need to expand on that, make sure they have at least the pilots have the resources, and we grow that program so that we meet all kids, whether it's a dental chair, a doctor, or a washer and dryer in the school to wash clothes. I mean, we do it all. And when I was a kid growing up, we didn't do any of that. And so schools are being asked to do way more, and should do more to meet these needs, these kids that are significant. So it's not great that these scores are not so great, but it's not surprising given all that the schools are being asked to do, and what we're suggesting, the ways in which we're disrespecting teachers and trying to routinize education. It is not something, it's not a mechanical task, as you know, in the college setting any more than it is in the K-12. It's a relationship, and we need to make sure that we foster that relationship, and treat folks who are doing that work with students, whether it's the bus driver. You've got 20, 30, 40 kids on a bus, and you're expecting one adult to drive a significant vehicle safely, and then tend to the kids in the back of the bus. That's a huge and difficult job. One of my board members is a bus driver. That is not easy. So we're asking a lot of people, and we should, and they're stepping up. But it remains a challenge, and I think we need to do a better job of attracting, and then and certainly focusing on the retention of the teachers there now. Right, if we give them the resources they need, if we treat their work environment better, frankly, and it will attract more people to the profession. So we always talk about recruitment and retention. I always think retention and recruitment. I think you retain good people, establish good environments, working environments, you'll recruit good people as well.
I know this is hard to answer, but is there anything, can you give us just a range of the teacher salary here in Vermont? I mean, it's a little tricky because I know it's different, but just to give us a snapshot of what we're looking at.
I think a starting teacher with a bachelor, I would say the high 30s starting, and somebody who's got masters and 30 years there might be some places close to a little over 90, I would think. I mean, in Chittenden County.
That's about right.
Yeah.
So anything. So we're the committee, know that I know we all would like to make positive change and make some real impact. I get what you're saying. It's we have to do something about it, and I know you believe that.
Right.
You have to do something about it. We all have to do something about it. And so I'm looking for those ideas, how we can continue to sort of move this. And I think we did start something with literacy, but any other ideas that you have this session as it relates to the teacher retention piece, what we're asking teachers, all those kinds of things. Our teachers probably maybe second to Senator Gulick, who recent teacher,
Right.
But you're their voice. You
Correct.
are for sure their voice.
Right.
So help us to fulfill those needs. Senator Gulick, here.
I did have my hand up. Thank you. I'll tell a very quick anecdote, and then I actually have something I want to add to the discussion. Years ago, my brother-in-law, who I have a lot of respect for, he's a lifelong educator. He was teaching in Ohio, and he moved up to assistant principal and eventually became principal of the school, 3,000 kids. And I remember saying to him, I can't believe you're taking on this job. I can't believe you're going to be principal of the school. And he just looked at me in a very deadpan kind of way, and he said, there's no job harder than being a teacher. And it just stuck with me.
Mm.
It's something I've held for a long time.
Yeah.
Coming from him, that really meant a lot. But I did want to, at some point, I do hope we can dive in a little bit into the literacy blueprint.
Yeah.
Because I actually do think that is we are going to see a change in our literacy rates. But I'd love someone to come in at some point and talk a little bit about the difference between whole language and phonics reading instruction, because that really sort of played out a little bit in that blueprint. And I think it's an important distinction and something that we should all understand.
That's a great idea. Absolutely, yeah.
So,
And
and
we pulled it apart a little bit 2 years ago and
Okay.
got to an interesting spot, but I think
Okay.
it's great for everybody to know
okay.
and kind of pull it apart again. We really
Okay.
do.
And then one of the big challenges with that blueprint that we identified over this past year was just implementing it, getting it
Yeah.
into schools, pushing it out and making sure that people they know it exists and they use it.
Yeah.
So that's just wanted to throw that out there.
Mr. you said attract better teachers. So what does a better teacher than what we're attracting right now look like?
I think there are not enough teachers, I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
And young students who are in college don't see teaching as an attractive career path. It's simply, I think it's true. There are the numbers of students nationally who are entering the education training programs, is declining. And so why is that? There are a host of reasons, I'm sure. I personally think that they see how teachers are not treated well in schools, frankly. I think they don't see the salary as being something they can manage. And if you come out of college with a sizable amount of student debt and you're making $40,000, you're not able to have an apartment and a car and a social life as a 22, 23-year-old. And that's a challenge.
And 50 years ago, I think this is accurate. You didn't see as many women go into law school. You saw some women transitioning right into teaching, and that has been sort of broken up in a good way. You're saying now, I'm going to go to medical school, I'm going to go to law school, I'm going to go into the business world. And I think historically in the United States, you did sort of see that kind of path for some people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
My membership is about 80% women.
Yeah.
And so there is a disparity.
Yeah.
The vast majority of our members, teacher members, have a master's degree. They are underpaid compared to their male counterparts with a master's degree. So the pay inequity continues. And I think it needs to stop.
Thank you, Chair Campion.
You don't need to be this formal, but feel free to be.
I love being formal.
Okay.
I just wanted to add, from my point of view, again, I'm just speaking as just me, I'm not speaking for any organization or anything, but I do feel as though we, the adults in the room, also don't do a great job of selling this profession, because as much as it is extremely difficult, it's also wonderful.
Yeah.
And we don't do a great job of explaining to, especially like our high school kids and our middle school kids, this is a good career and you should pursue it. And it's something I've talked about a lot in Burlington and something I really would like to work on. I don't know what that looks like, but we need to tell a better story.
I think you're right. And I think you were the one in committee last week who also brought up this idea of, can we get young people to the classroom earlier through the career technical experiences? Kids are there for a range of things. We're talking about an ag doing more around on-farm slaughtering. How do we train kids and farmers to do that? You get nursing, you have pre-med students, law students. Can we get young people into the classroom a little bit to try it? Because the research does show there are going to be people who get them in early, see if they like it. Don't wait and see if it's, gosh, maybe I shouldn't have spent my time there. Senator Hashim.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up with what Senator Gulick just mentioned. It would be great to advertise and talk about how wonderful the job is, but it's also really hard to do that when the pay is really low, when there's so many other challenges. My daughter's mother was a former teacher for a number of years, and the amount of work that she did outside the classroom, over the weekend, after work hours, the amount of her own money that she spent on supplies, you know, it's a super rewarding job, but it's also really hard to say, yeah, you know, you're gonna have to spend tons of unpaid hours, you know, and it's gonna be a really challenging job too. So it's, yeah, it's just, so it's more of a comment, not a question.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just tough to sell that.
Let me respond. I think that's right. And Senator Gulick, I think you'll know as well as anybody in this room, those moments with the kids, the time with the kids is great, right? That's the magic. So more time with students and less of the headache, right? I mean, how do we remove the other stuff? I'm not here advocating on behalf of Jay Nichols and the principals, but certainly we need to pay principals more. That's a demanding, tough job, and they are the managers in the building every day, and they can take away some of those other noise items that take away and detract from the time with students that's so valuable, and frankly, where the good happens.
Senator.
Castleton University used to be a teacher's college,
Yes.
and now they're a general purpose liberal arts. You think that's detracted from kind of growing our own here?
Well, I'll say this, we work very closely with Rick Reardon at Castleton. Juliet Longchamp in my office and Rick are close. We work very closely with them. Could we collectively do more? You bet. Should Castleton be, you know, go back to being a teacher's college? I don't think that's what they want. They're a university now, and they provide a great service to the community in the state. So I'm not trying to take that away from them. Could we expand on their educator program? Yes. We'd probably explore that and work with them to do so. We've been working very closely with them for years to try to, I know for a fact recently, I mean, we've worked with them closely to make sure that students who enter their program graduate having had the training they need and ready to hit the ground running when they get to a classroom. So we work with them very closely. Could we do more? Absolutely. But you could have more students coming into that program and not going into the other options they may have. So Castleton's great. Work with them.
What about the 45-year-old who wants a new career, try something different? They've been in a lab or whatever they may have been doing, car manager, you know, all sorts of things. And they realize now at this point, they're like, they want to be a teacher. Tell me the best path for that person who really, we also know that there are people out there that just are also going to be really good at it. So what's the sort of, I don't mean the fastest path, but I am curious about the fastest path.
Well, I think peer review would
Okay.
be my suggestion. And we work a lot with people doing
Tell us a
that.
little bit about
Peer review is using some of your experience in the past to the TAP program in Chittenden County. You know, there are ways to do this. We've supported many folks doing it. We have a significant, if not 100% track record getting people through the program. I think that's Juliet Longchamp's program does that, and that's fantastic. What I would say is that there are some states now, because the educator shortage is national, they're lowering their standards. So one state, for example, that's said if you were you're coming out of the military, you automatically are entitled to a teacher license. We don't support that. Just because somebody has done something previously does not mean they're going to be a great teacher. There's got to be some peer review, some training, getting that person ready to be a teacher. It's very different than working with students who are 15, 16 years old. Requires a different set of skills than working with adults in some manufacturing facility or doing something else like that. So we're very cognizant of the need, but we're also very aware of and cautious about is lowering the standards. We do not think that's the way to go. But certainly peer review is an option for adults who have been working elsewhere and want to get into teaching. And we work a lot with them.
Thank you,
You're
Chair.
welcome.
If you want, I could speak really briefly about peer review.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I've
Because
never-
I do think there, you know, that path forward for some people in certain groups, like I'm really interested that if the people who are leaving the military are interested in teaching, I think our governor, the state, and others would be very interested in getting them here and doing a little bit of training. You know, just sort of, you know, that sounds like if there's a population that.
Correct. I'm not
Yeah, no, I know.
disparaging the
Oh, no,
military.
I
What I'm saying
completely know.
is just because somebody's been in one position or another,
Absolutely.
military or some other
Yeah,
thing, does
yeah.
not make them automatically a
Right.
good teacher.
Right, yeah.
I think there's got to be
Yeah.
some training.
Yeah, yeah.
I have not gone through the peer review process myself, but I have sat on the oversight, on an oversight committee, on a review committee for some folks who went through the peer review. So my recollection was that if someone wants to do peer review, they put together a portfolio. And the portfolio consists of all kinds of things, everything from, obviously your CV in there, but reflections on the work that you've done in the past and how it pertains to education, how it's relevant. Writing, there's a lot of writing pieces in there. There are some examples of experience. And then you go back, your transcripts are in there, everything sort of comes together, and then you come in front of this like jury of your peers and you present your portfolio and you get to speak to it as well. And then your peer group decides whether or not they feel that you are fit or capable or, able to become a teacher. And in one case that I'm thinking of, I mean, the gentleman who got peer reviewed by us went on to become this incredible teacher, incredible librarian. And he had gone to Norwich University. He had been in the military, played hockey. So anyway, it's a great opportunity, and it's a great alternative to like maybe going through the full, like you said, as a non-traditional student. It's a great opportunity. TAP, I don't quite know as much about, but I think it's also a good program.
Teacher apprenticeship program.
Yeah.
At the same concept. Theory.
Yeah.
Senator,
I actually have to step out for a quick minute to find Senator Sears, but I didn't want to be rude and just leave abruptly. But thank you for your testimony and coming
Thank you,
in.
Senator.
I appreciate it. Should be back.
More to come.
so as the representative of the teachers, I mean, what would you say, what are teachers telling you again, that if you were to measure your own success with this session, what are the 3 things that teachers are saying, okay, we really need these things? I mean, what they could really use right now.
No, 3
And-
things, but.
I mean.
No,
I'm
I'm
just
saying,
trying to get a
I could
sense
go on. I
because
mean,
I sometimes might be too black and white with some of these things, but I like, we want to get. some-
you and I talked about it. I mean, I
Yeah.
think student behaviors is
Yeah.
number 1. I don't know how we address that. I don't know what role the legislature plays in addressing that, but certainly looking at ratios.
Yeah.
School counselor,
Yeah.
mental health workers who are in schools would be a good place to start. That is,
Great.
the behaviors
Yeah.
are a challenge right now. And it's kids screaming, for help.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. They're not acting out because they want to.
Yeah.
They need help.
Yeah, I think I may have told you, one superintendent who said 88% of things are going well, maybe 90% of things are going well, but 10%, it is really, really hard. And they are looking for some, and this could be where the legislature is helpful. I know in my district, they're building, kind of reconfiguring a building for students that are really having these big issues, saying, okay, I mean, this kind of used to exist in our area, and I think throughout the country, there used to be some of these spots. And because these really are this isn't the kid who, gosh, just trying to find my path. These are, like you're saying, real serious issues.
Yeah, and we're talking about an alternative program
Alternative programs, yeah.
in the school in some way, right? Physically,
In-
maybe, or
Not
something.
physically, but
maybe
in the
not, right.
community.
In the
Yeah,
community,
It's the old supervisory union building.
Right. We've done a great job with mainstreaming kids, which is fantastic. But these are kids who I think are not thriving in the mainstream right
Yeah,
now. And
yeah.
in fact, and we're not meeting their needs
Yeah.
in that system. So
Okay, good.
there's the idea of free and appropriate public education, FAPE. And we need to meet that, obviously. But for those students who that's not working, we need to do better. And maybe an alternative program,
Okay.
not housed in the school.
Sure.
In the public school system. But that's resources, staff and otherwise.
But that is possibly where we can be helpful. I know
Yes.
people are using semester funds for some of these kinds of things also, because, and so people are getting creative, and we can pull this apart a little bit with some districts that are doing it, but that's helpful, and certainly the ratio.
Yeah, so we look at that as ratios,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
to the extent there are not enough school counselors,
Yeah.
for example, or what I'm hearing from members is, I've got a kid in crisis.
yeah,
I make a call to get them services through the designated agencies, and it's months and months of waiting. And this kid's in crisis that day and needs help, and months later it's not helpful.
ESSER funds seem to have helped in some districts with some of these things, parent engaged, family engagement officers, groups like that, but maybe not so much on the counseling end.
I still hear the
You're not
need
hearing
for school counselors
Yeah,
and
okay.
mental health,
Yeah.
social workers. We're short.
Yeah.
The state is, I'll
Yeah.
just say that, and
Okay.
and so maybe the better option is to bring that, it used to be an AHS type, social service, bring them to the schools, own up to it, but don't penalize schools for doing what previously was an AHS service.
Okay, other
Um,
things.
I think student loan debt is real. We've got to figure out a way in this country, but also in the state to address that. And I know we've worked with VSAC, Scott Giles, to,
Yeah, and we're seeing him this afternoon.
I understand you. And I think that there are some models that we can use, such as the nurses program. So I think there are ways to do that. I'm trying to think, I'm looking at my colleague Colin.
Well, I would just say on the educator workforce front, because I think we're talking about, as Jeff said, for the record, Colin Robinson, Vermont NEA, and I do apologize, I'm heading to Seneca Ops in 5 minutes here. But, so on the educator workforce front, it is the retention, as Jeff spoke to, as well as the recruitment. So to that end, there's gonna be in the bill in the House, had some conversations with Senator Clarkson in Economic Development about using the teacher workforce as the kind of bedrock of their workforce development bill, as they did with nursing last year. And talking about student loan forgiveness, reducing barriers around peer review fees. So alternative pathways to instruction, eliminate the peer review fees. So that's another barrier. Creating grants. Currently, people who choose to go through a traditional path to become an educator, become a teacher, have to essentially have not only an unpaid internship, they have to pay, they have to go into debt to do their student teaching. So they take college credits, go into debt to do their student teaching to get their teacher's license. That shouldn't be a thing, right? So those credits required to do your student teaching to become an educator should be covered. And so those are some of the things that are in that kind of omnibus bill. The tail on that and the impact of that is to be determined, and it's not going to address the acute needs here and now. And that's why, as Jeff said, we'd love to have Juliet Longchamp come in and talk
She's
about
terrific.
her program that she's been working with, providing wraparound supports to people who are working in our schools, paraeducators, who are wanting to get their license through the peer review process. Because what we know is folks who aren't supported in that process don't have high success rates. But when they have supports are wrapped around them through cohorts, through dedicated instruction, they are able to successfully complete that and enter a profession that might not otherwise have been successful. The other component, not to take Jeff's third item, but it's part of the.
He didn't have one.
I
That's why I looked to you.
had a couple. I mean, that's.
Is we've had some conversations with members in the House, going back to the question you asked earlier around teacher pay. What we know is that in order to retain and attract teachers in some of our rural and sparsely populated communities, lower income communities, they might not be able to pay as much as other parts of the state. We have local districts, local collective bargaining agreements. Well, what can we do to help bring the base up in those places? So a starting teacher, a 23-year-old coming out of college will want to go work in a place like Canaan and be able to support themselves. So the construct that we've been working on, and it hasn't been fully fleshed out yet, is for folks who remember the tax incentives offered in Act 46 for mergers and consolidations. An echo of that for districts at the local level through a collective bargaining process, achieve a minimum salary for starting teachers. It doesn't mandate, doesn't require, but it creates a tax incentive opportunity for districts that collaboratively with their teachers at the local level achieve a standard of base pay to attract and retain teachers. So those are some kind of specific policy items in this educator workforce lane. One of the real tricky things that I don't know that we have been able to come up with a clear policy solution on is school support staff. And we know we have about 1,000 vacancies of paraeducators, I believe. And, you know, these are folks who provide critical frontline support to students, not only in crisis, but also day to day to help with classroom management and supporting the needs of students in many ways. But, you know, when you can get a job that's paying 18 or 20 or $24 an hour, maybe in a service sector where you're not going to have to worry about a student who might have a really challenging moment in that day, that might be, you might choose to change careers. And how do we attract and retain school support staff is, I think, probably a little trickier in this sort of economic moment. But I did want to flag for the committee.
Senator Gould.
Thank you very much. I just want to say, I just want to say I'm really excited to hear what Colin had to say about eliminating some of the barriers around certification, licensure, and pathways to becoming a teacher. And here's why, there are a number of reasons, but one, we know that, for example, our BIPOC students learn much better. There's a lot of data around this when they have teachers who look like them. In Burlington, for example, we really want to hire teachers of color and BIPOC teachers so that they better reflect the student population. So many of our new Americans cannot enter this profession because they don't have the resources to pay this fee, that fee, go through this hoop, go through that hoop, and I don't mean to use the word hoop, but it becomes a burden. And we have some incredible students who would make fantastic teachers. But again, we need to tell the right story, but we also need to eliminate those barriers. That would be hugely helpful.
Yeah. That's the bill we're working on. As well as the concept of creative incentives for schools to locally bargain for pay that meets what the state establishes as a standard, create an incentive there. So between removing the barriers to entry and creating a better pay scale for folks, we think is a good start. And that's what we're working on. Those two are really key to us.
We talked last week and a little bit this week about equity. There are schools, we have Secretary French coming in to talk, I think it's next Thursday. There are schools in our districts that, in Varsity State, that do not have even close to the same offerings as other schools. We've heard where, anecdotally, we all know that the worst story that kid didn't get into UVM because only 2 years of math were offered at the school. That was several years ago. President Sullivan made an exception to the rule. Foreign languages, other things. Is the remedy to that saying schools have to, granted, I know you can't hire a teacher, but should the state have 20 years ago said, okay, you're going to be, no matter what school you go to in the state, you're going to be able to take calculus. No matter what school you're going to go to in the state, you're going to be able to take, German one,
So, Colin mentioned Act 46. Act 46 was not about consolidation. It was about consolidating governance, which was fair enough as it goes. The reason behind it was to make sure that all schools had the offerings that all other schools had, right? We had the accusation then was these small schools weren't able to offer to students what the larger schools were. So we've consolidated governance under Act 46, and nobody's looked at whether that worked to say, are there more offerings? Did that work? Right? Did we consolidate just for the sake of consolidation, or was it for a purpose? It was designed for a purpose, but nobody's looked at whether there are more offerings. Nobody.
So we're
That's-
gonna start that conversation next week. I think it's, in my district, for example, I could see how one school board now overseeing more elementary schools, there's more of that offering, every elementary school. I don't know how that changes though, if Bennington, if Mount Anthony Union has several foreign languages, and Craftsbury Academy has Spanish 1 and 2. You know, that, I don't know how that gets to that, but we'll pull it as part of
Right.
it and
I mean,
try to understand it better.
Personally, I like the smaller schools. I thought, the human connection, the
Yeah,
teacher
sure,
connection
Sure.
is greater there. There's some evidence to say. Now, how small is too small and how big is too big, that's a debate. We did consolidate under Act 46. That's a truism. We're supposed to be doing curriculum now at the district level, so those things should be equalized at the elementary school, for example,
Right.
in Bennington.
Yeah.
Everybody should be having the same offerings and getting students prepared for the next level, similarly.
Yeah.
Maybe not identically, but similarly, very similarly. So that was supposed to address that issue. Now Craftsbury,
I'm just pulling them out.
right, there are other small schools that are, and maybe we should look at them, but they do provide a great education, I would say. And Craftsbury one of them, and they have offerings that other schools don't have, I would say.
Right. So we're gonna kind of try to pull.
And they
it apart,
reflect
see
their
what's
community.
there. Yeah.
That's what their community wants. And I think that's a good thing.
Unless you're the kid that really, really wants that third year of math, calculus, and the school doesn't offer it, then that's where it gets a little tricky.
Right. I think there are ways to do it.
Yep, I think technology,
I
there's
think-
all sorts of opportunities, foreign languages, there's all sorts of opportunities through technology also.
Vermont Virtual Learning
Yeah.
is down in Springfield that covers the state. Has done a good job with that. So I think there are ways to do it.
So do you mind, so we have the state colleges coming in in about 10 minutes. Do you mind giving us a high overview of your other priorities?
Sure.
Some of which you've touched on.
Yeah, we've touched on workforce. I'll say that. That's huge. And that's on page 2. The adverse childhood experiences that kids are suffering from. Again, ratios. Universal school meals, we support. We are in favor of eliminating the property tax. Say that, in favor of the income tax. It's a fairer, more equitable way to fund education. We think it should be done. There was a great study done last summer, fall. And that was previously there was trying to blank on the commission, the Vermont Tax Structure Commission also recommended it. So that was a bipartisan commission. So I think there's a lot of evidence and support for moving to an income tax and abolishing the property tax for residential. So not the non-residential rate, but the residential rate. I think that'd be fair. Certainly we, Vermont NEA and the School Boards Association have VHI, which is the Vermont Education Health Initiative, which is their jointly administered trust. We're paying too much for pharmacy. School boards are paying too much. My members are paying too much. We need to get pharmaceuticals under control, simply put. So we've got an initiative there. You're going to talk, I am sure, about school construction.
Yes.
A big issue.
Yeah.
I think the treasurer might be a good person to have in here. We think there are some good models around the country on how we can do this. Rhode Island being one example, where they use state bonding capacity to really shore up their schools and make sure that they were safe and healthy for all who entered them. So I think that's, as I said in my testimony, the learning environments for students are my members' working environments, and they're intertwined, and I think necessarily so. And we want to make sure that there's a healthy, safe school everybody's in. So I know that you care about that as well. Act 173. This is a special ed funding law from a couple of years ago. I serve on that advisory council and have since the inception and the passage of Act 173. I will tell you, Act 173 was passed with the idea of giving educators professional development because they're changing how they were delivering services to all students. and hopefully thereby reducing the number of students on IEPs in special ed. We've not delivered that PD yet. And therefore, we're calling for a repeal of 173 until that PD is provided. You started last year, the states started last year and went to the block grant. So it used to be a reimbursement model for schools to get public ed or special ed was reimbursed. It's no longer that, it's a block grant. And that is, in some places it is going to, and it is wreaking havoc with their finances. And teachers haven't yet, educators haven't been yet prepared on how to do, how to change their practice in a way that's consistent with 173. It's a major concern for us.
Do we have time to ask them to dig into that? The difference between the reimbursement and the block grant?
We have somebody coming in for Act 173 by
Oh, great,
itself.
okay,
But
perfect.
if you want to say a word just about the difference between the block grant and the reimbursement process?
Well, I don't know, when schools previously submitted, or did work on behalf of special ed education students, they were reimbursed for that service. Now schools get a block grant, a census block grant based on the number of students they have in their school, and no more. So if you have a particularly high need student, in theory, you could, or students plural, you could exceed the block grant, and that would then deprive the other student, the rest of the students, and even those special needs students, from the services to which we think they're entitled. That's not okay, because the idea behind 173 was literacy focused, get to kids earlier, focus on literacy. This is out of the district management group report from almost 10 years ago now at this point, where they worked with 10 schools intensively for 3 to 4 years, trained their staff on how to deliver services better. We thought that was a good model going forward. And one of the other ideas was more special education teachers working directly with kids and doing less paperwork. One of the things I hear all the time is special ed paperwork is killing teachers.
It's coming up.
And one of the reasons why we supported Act 173 originally was designed to reduce the paperwork and free up teachers to actually teach and work closer with kids, all students. That has not happened. Again, the PD hasn't happened, and the paperwork hasn't been reduced as much as it could be, if at all. So I still, that's an equity issue. Some schools have resources for special ed that smaller schools do not. And we need to do better in this area. Special education is critical. It's important to provide these services to special needs kids, but it's becoming a significant challenge for schools in many ways. And we need to provide special education services, period. We need to do it. We need to do it well and with fidelity. But we also, in this context of Act 173, we want to make sure that all educators are properly trained to deliver the services to all students. So it's a big issue for us. And finally, I think I'll stop with teacher pension. Thank you for the work last year, but what I've heard from members is we need some stability in pensions. So please no more changes that make it less attractive to become a teacher. Last year was tumultuous for all of us, and we want to attract the future. And if there's a lot of noise of teacher pensions aren't stable, we're concerned. So there's some continue with the funding. There's a lot of bullets in there, but making sure that the deal that we struck last year is achieved would be immensely helpful. Touch on Act 46, and just workforce generally is key.
This Friday, we're hearing, if we're here tomorrow, depending on the weather, we're hearing an overview of the Macon decision by the Supreme Court, and you have that on your list. What are you hoping we would do?
We think the Carson v. Macon decision changed. There is no more status quo. Supreme Court said we must fund religious schools, and it did. And I think we as a state need to figure out how we respond to the Carson decision, and how to do it in a way that's fair to all. And
Yeah, and like I said, we're gonna dig into that a little bit and get a better understanding.
I think it's going to be a long conversation, but a necessary one. We didn't come in seeking this. The U.S. Supreme Court dropped this decision on all of us. And now we've got to respond. It wasn't something we were advocating prior to the
So
Supreme
remember,
Court.
these dollars have been going to religious schools in Vermont for a long time.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Public dollars have been going to religious schools prior to Megan. That was one of the things we pulled apart last year based on the Chittenden case. So it's not, I don't want anybody to think that all of a sudden dollars are just starting to flow, that we do know historically, and we heard from individuals last year, so yeah, these dollars have been flowing.
Right.
Yeah. So
But that's the question, is how does the state respond to that?
Yeah.
And remain true to our constitutional core values.
and make sure kids are educated
Yes.
as best they possibly can be in the state. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Any final questions for Mr. Fannin at this point? Thank you.
Thank you
We'll see a
all.
lot more of you.
You will.
And
Nice to see you.
committee, why don't we just do a quick 5-minute stretch in bathroom and then
Thank
we'll